I'm thrilled to have Katie Dill here. Katie is the head of design at Stripe. You all know that company. I'm sure you've probably used it maybe even the last couple of days, even if you didn't know you used it. Before that, Katie, so she runs all of product design, content marketing, brand, pretty much everything that design touches at a company that really cares about design. So excited to have you here. Before that, Katie was at Lyft, running design there, and before that, Airbnb, another company that's sort of a nodal player in the design space, and is a proud alum of Art Center and Colgate and some other really cool experiences, some of which we'll unpack today. So, welcome. I'm Steve Vassallo, General Partner at Foundation Capital. Guess these are our mugshots. We're about a 30-year-old venture firm based in Silicon Valley, investing across enterprise, fintech, and crypto. Believe in sort of two mega trends that are sort of hitting us right now pretty much at the same time around AI. You've all heard about that. You'll see it in 100 panels over the next few days. And blockchain, crypto. And design is this interesting place sort of serving both of those, in some cases bridging it. So what we wanted to share with you today is some of the insights from a study that we at Foundation did in partnership with Designer Fund, which is an early stage venture firm based in Silicon Valley as well, whereby we basically surveyed 400 design leaders. These are folks, 70% of them had more than 10 years of design experience. So, folks, had been doing this for a while. And these are folks across product design, some folks in brand, some folks in marketing as well. So you guys, I think, will probably resonate with this audience across all stages of companies. So early stage, think sort of startups, roughly a third of the folks. Growth stage companies, kind of think 50 to 500, roughly a third, 20% or so. And then the balance was companies actually larger than 500. So it's a good mix. And what I wanted to do is start off with Katie today. We kind of looked in the survey at sort of the three phases of design, exploration being one. This is ideation, research, creation itself, the actual work of doing design, and then delivery, which was sort of the testing, handoff to engineering, and those three boxcars, if you will. And I'd love to just have you start with some thoughts around how AI is penetrating design and the design org and the activities that you all have at Stripe. Kind of what's changed in the last year even, and it's changing fast, we know. So
when we're talking to designers, we're seeing that earlier in the process is where AI is certainly coming up more often. And as the later stages of the process down funnel, seemingly less so. I think there's an interesting questions as to why that is. Certainly what I can tell you at Stripe, it feels maybe safer and easier as an onboarding into AI in those early stages, in the rough stages where you don't expect perhaps the doneness or the excellentness, and you're more willing to take some risks on tools that you're less familiar with. And as I was just saying, we at Stripe have a part of our business called Stripe Press. We print books. We print books that we feel share ideas of progress. And we take a lot of time to make the covers something of joy. And with that process, AI has become really, really powerful. And in order to get many ideas out quickly, our designers are using AI to try things on for size. And it dramatically increases the speed of our process so that we can see things. And then once we're boiling it down to the ones that we really like, that really feel like they fit for the moment, fit for the content, we start to then get into the hands-on sketching. But what you can see for sure in creation and delivery phases is that there is definitely value in what AI can bring. One of the things that we're also seeing is the ability to scale with AI. So we have, for example, a brand studio team that works on all of our advertisements. Last year, we shipped 500 assets. They were different billboards in major cities across the United States and in the UK. 500 versions of a core concept that our team developed. Some of these are certainly bespoke and really need the hands-on judgment and refinement of an individual. And in many cases, the starting point can be accelerated by AI to help us find what are the right versions of reusing this kind of concept and these assets, and so that you could do it at scale. So we're seeing a few different places where it certainly makes the process a lot easier, but it's all about how do you introduce a new tool that folks yesterday didn't know how to use.
Yeah, Katie's hitting on, this is the second point, and this is, I think this point around sort of billboards, or in the old days where you had to deal with form factor across sort of different devices, different resolutions, different screen sizes. 68% folks, this repeated tasks, why are designers actually having to waste time on changing these details across hundreds or thousands, in some cases, of assets? So lots of penetration there. This point around the ideation, I think Katie said something interesting to me when we were catching up just prior to this sort of sense of designers are moving from being sort of purely about creating the initial assets, those sort of, the products of a brainstorm, the ideation assets, to directors. So as opposed to and curators, so as opposed to having to go create 100 different ideas from which we might choose 3 or 4 to then take to pixel perfect, designers are letting the tools do this. Again, not in a way that's kind of without guardrails or without lots of intention, specifically with respect to prompts. And we'll talk about prompting in a bit. But now they're actually sort of letting the tools do this, and then sort of being much more interactive in using the tools and curating and directing the way you might almost as a sort of movie director. But one of the things that you highlighted when we were looking at this graph initially was like, well, hey, what's going on with collaboration? Why is there not enough? Why is it not helping here? I'm curious what you're seeing at Stripe, and is that true? Is that fit with your experience, and what might you imagine over the next kind of little bit to sort of improve upon that?
I feel like, when we think about what AI can do, it seems like a no-brainer that it would assist in the collaboration between different disciplines. So for example, you can mock up a design in Figma and put it in dev mode, and now you can more easily share with your engineer partner. You can use Cursor to develop code for your idea, even if you don't know how to code. You can prototype something, build it, an animation, and now show your engineer, this is what we're thinking about. This is how I really want this thing to move, as opposed to doing just lots of hand gestures. So doesn't that make it easier? Why isn't that just more commonly happening? And I shouldn't judge or shouldn't assume, but I will, which is, I wonder if it's, again, just that fear factor that people have. And in some ways, AI today in the workplace still feels very solitary, like individuals on their own experimenting almost quietly. And I think that's an unfortunate reality that I think we have opportunity to discuss, let's make that different than it is. But I feel like people are hesitant to introduce AI, maybe a new tool to them that they're less familiar with, at too many points of risk in their process. And one of those risky points, of course, is the point of collaboration, like where a handoff might exist. So a designer could say, I'm going to just use AI at home to experiment and come up with some ideas. But then when it's time to actually pass off to somebody else, I'm not going to use that tool. Maybe they think that means it doesn't look, that they didn't do it, right? That they're using, something to their advantage, or that they're uncertain about how it's going to work. So I do think that organizations should do something to kind of lower that barrier entry, help others, see how AI could be used in a responsible way. One of the things that we do at Stripe is that we have internally, Go/LLM, and people can use LLMs in their work. We have, kind of our own versions of LLMs. We also let people use different models. And that way, they know that that's a safe place. You could put secret company docs and you're not worried about that getting shared with anybody else. And also, another fun thing is that, I don't know about any of you all that maybe went through performance reviews. It's performance review season. Oh my goodness, just got at the end of that. We know that people could benefit from the use of LLMs during their performance review process. However, there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. So we shipped guidelines on how you can use LLMs as a part of the performance process, synthesis, and writing of reviews in a way that's, ethical, smart, efficient. And so I think that's another example of making it a little easier for people to think about how AI can come into their workplace, because we should be trying it. We should be using it at all of these moments, but in a way that maybe is going to feel a little less low risk.
Yep. You had mentioned some of the ways that you guys are even using the tools internally to help sort of judge the quality of an email or communication. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think it's such an interesting way to guide people. I mean, you guys are so intentional at Stripe. It's one of the things, and we'll get to the craft and beauty piece of this, but so intentional. But the idea that like, oh, wait, I could actually be a better communicator, particularly for folks who don't do this every day. We write emails, I'm sure the folks in the room, like I feel like my job is just drinking bottled water and writing emails. But what are the tools doing for you there and helping you kind of guide in terms of sort of being a better communicator?
Yeah, no, that's a great call. And this is, I think one of the things that's also on my mind a lot about like, where in our process should we be thinking about using AI today that we aren't, right? Because sometimes it's like hidden under the covers of like, oh yeah, of course, we all know you can ideate and you can generate images, but like, what about assessment? So for example, I'm sure like many of you, the words, what you write, and how you communicate is a very big part of your product experience, and one that certainly shouldn't be underestimated, how impactful that is to your users. And I'm sure your teams are full of people that write well. However, I think we also can all understand, relate to the fact that sometimes, being on top of the details and the grammar, or being a part of like your company's style guide and what's the right way to communicate, or learning from past mistakes, these things can be difficult for every employee in your company to understand. And so what we are looking for are ways to scale excellence, learn from the past, and improve the next step. What we're doing today is we have this thing called CraftBot, and when we write emails or various documentation, we can send it to the CraftBot, and the CraftBot can assess whether or not we're fitting our style guide. Are we using the Oxford comma or not? We do at Stripe.
It's a holy order if you use the Oxford comma, I think Patrick would probably tell you.
But it also could be intelligent enough to know, are we communicating clearly? Are there, the types of visuals or hierarchy in the typography that tend to be more impactful? And this is a starting point. It gives a score, which is really interesting. And, I wouldn't say that like we're just going to follow that to the letter, no pun intended, and just, ship it just because the thing said it was 100%. But it is a starting point as to whether or not, that email might need more work or not. And we're doing this, trying to find ways across our product as well to do that, because the reality is, especially in a company where you're moving fast, people are shipping every day, and somebody over here might not know how somebody else over here is using the same word, but those kind of connection points are really important to ensure that you have coherency for your user. So AI can just essentially help us accelerate that.
I want to come back to this sort of question of who's using these tools at what kinds of orgs. And it was very clear from the data of the folks that we surveyed and also some interviews that the early stage companies are way ahead. And there's probably some reasons for that we'll get into. But there's also, surprisingly, growth stage companies and companies of scale being more hesitant. And there's questions around sort of where's my data going? There's questions around, are these tools yet too biased? Like, how do I deal with hallucinations? I'd love for you to just kind of unpack a little bit what you observed from this data, this sort of sense of leverage. I think you talked about this earlier, like, oh, wow, you have 100 designers at Stripe. Can they do the work of 1,000 designers or 10,000 at some point? And why you think some of the larger companies just aren't there yet?
Yeah. I mean, I find this fascinating, and I feel like this is like almost like a call to arms in some way. I mean, some fun facts, with so Stripe, we serve companies of all sizes to help them with any number of their financial infrastructure needs. It's about payments, about how to help them generate revenue and build their billing models. And we, today I think the latest was $1.4 trillion in payment processing last year. We are also serving the most successful AI startups. We last year, I think I was just telling you, we had 700 AI agent companies start on Stripe. Now that was last year before, just when AI agents was like becoming a thing. So you can imagine what that's going to be this year. It's just like the growth is astounding. And so
this is pre-crypto. These are folks who are just using your traditional Rails and not trying to do stuff on top of Bridge, for example.
it's a great point, yeah. And I feel like with that, you can see this just like amazing growth. And what's also interesting is how fast these AI native AI startups are growing. So for example, it used to be, SaaS. SaaS was the big thing, and this is, clearly a high growth business opportunity. And it was 3 years to 5 million in ARR for these SaaS organizations. What we're seeing with these AI startups is they're getting to that, and more so in 2 years. The rapid growth to revenue is really, really exciting. So, we should look at this and say, wow, they're using AI, and guess what? It's working. It is really a powerful tool to help these organizations grow. And to the question as to well, why don't we think we're seeing it at the later stages? I think there's probably, a number of things, one of which you pointed out, maybe just like a fear of what about our data? But then I think there's also just the realities of debt, tech debt. They already have all these systems that they're built on, so it's a little bit harder to change. And then, I think the other part is just maybe they don't feel like they have to. They're a little bit resting on their laurels, perhaps. But we, at Stripe, are working with these large organizations that are, realizing that they need that kind of technical transformation and are wanting to look at what startups are doing. So I feel like we're seeing it happen, which is great. I do imagine in 6 months, if we check in again, I hope that this chart would look different. And I think the awesome thing too is when you think about, what AI can do, and if you maybe are willing to, face the tech debt that you have, your website today probably, although digital, is probably very static, right? Every user probably sees the same thing. But is every user the same? Is every user coming there on the same journey? What brought them there? What is in their mindset? What is their mental model? What is the next step they're going to take? Might AI be helping you create a site that is more reflective of what, that user is actually looking to do? So I think there's the way AI can help your process building, but it also can be how you serve your users. At Stripe, we use AI to fight fraud. We use AI to help our users grow their business and look for insights on how they can drive better growth in their revenue. These are the tools, both externally in which you might be using AI, but also internally to educate yourself on then, the powers of it so that you can bring that into the product.
When I think about companies that are more mature trying to do experiments with design, I can't help but be a little bit cynical. How many of you all have seen it's either the magic wand on Notion or it's the 2 stars that look like they're probably...
The stars are everywhere.
We're just going to bolt this kebab shop onto your French restaurant and hope it works. And I'm curious and you think about folks that have been more thoughtful about this, that are really taking kind of a more AI native approach or Gen AI native approach, not just trying to bolt it on as a button. Who do you admire? Who's doing this well? How are you guys actually thinking about it? And even rethinking about the products at their most core level so that it doesn't feel like it's a bolt-on?
In some ways, what it worries me about is people forgetting great design and just putting AI to make up for it. In some ways, we're at a tendency we could be doing that internally as well. So recently I was reviewing some really exciting work about how we could infuse AI into our dashboard to make the products even more powerful. So you're viewing an insightful chart about how your business is progressing, but then how can I act on that and connect that with other pieces of information or benchmark that, what more can I do there? But what was so interesting in this discussion that we were having is just well, how much of that should just be the way the product should work, built-in functionality or affordances on it, or should there also be this chatbot that allows you to do it on top of it? And I am worried about the world where it's well, there's the product that people kind of just let be and don't continue to innovate on, and then they just put a chatbot on the side. I don't want to name names of other companies that are doing that, but like I do think that
I'm happy to do that if you want.
Yeah, I'll just whisper to you. No, I do think there is that. So I feel like we have to remember that AI is in some ways it's kind of like if you think about like the early '90s, it's just like, hey, the internet is here, like we should do this. And I think I know there were companies that were hesitant, like, well, is this just going to be a blip? Is this just like a thing and a moment in time, and it's not really something I should invest in? And then others, like lead adopters, that were certainly like, no, I'm gonna get a website for my company. I'm gonna start this. I want to do this. I'm going to invest in this. And I think the AI, just like wave is far more than that. It is absolutely moving faster. It's absolutely bigger than what we saw then. But of course, you get some of the same behaviors of people that are early adopting and those that are maybe taking their time a bit here. But if we think about that in retrospect, it wasn't looked at as just like, oh, there's the internet and like let's go have two people from the team working on the internet. It's like, how is anybody within your organization thinking about this as just like it is just another and maybe one of the most important tools that you now have at your disposal?
This is a really important point that Katie just made, and it reminds me of a good friend of mine, Rousseau Kazi, who's the founder of Threads and was at Facebook early days. And he joined Facebook, and I think 2 weeks later, they disbanded the mobile team. And of course, you can think, well, what does that mean? It's this point that it's infused into everything, right? It was no longer this thing that you had to think about as a bolt-on per se. It had to be in the way you were thinking. And that's, of course, I think where we're headed with AI. And in fact, I think the greatest compliment to a technology is to actually diffuse into the background when people don't really know it anymore. And it's just doing what it needs to do in a very sort of diffused way. I also want to talk a little bit about the roles that people, like the impact of AI on people in this room. And there's a great stat from the very beginning. I jumped over it earlier. Which is the good news is you all are using these tools. That's awesome. 90% of designers that we interviewed are using the tools. So, and they're using them for all, in all the ways that Katie was unpacking. There's also folks who are like, and by the way, I don't think it cuts with demographics or size of company, but there's definitely folks who are like raised cross to those tools. Like, get this out of here. This is going to replace my job. And I'm curious, as you think about like the Katie that's at Art Center today, who's thinking about a career in design, how do you advise these individuals? How do you think about which skills that they should continue to sharpen? Is it the skills that are sort of more human-centered design oriented? Is it the taste? Is it the beauty and craft that we'll talk about? Is it, nope, you need to be a little bit more T-shaped. Give me some more sort of horizontal, like you should be using Cursor and V0 and really kind of getting more experienced in some of the developer-oriented tools around the sort of delivery handoff. How do you advise young designers, the younger version of you?
I mean, number one, I would say, like, I think, human jobs are safe. Will they change? For sure. Is that a bad thing? No. Are you all familiar with the term Luddite, I would imagine? Are you familiar with where it came from? It's so like early 19th century, the creation of the loom and ways of building textiles quickly, and people in great opposition were, burning down these machines. If all of our garments were done by hand today, you would have a lot less cool stuff. We certainly, are in that same position, right? There's a technology here that is in some ways scary because it's like, how, what, where, what are we doing? But it is also absolutely an accelerant and something that can, help us do what we do differently and better in a lot of ways. And I think students at this moment in time have that opportunity to get ahead of that. And I think there's the saying, right, that like AI is not taking your job, but somebody using AI might. I think that is probably true. And what might change with the jobs that we see is that, yes, I do think that curation and judgment and creative direction will become more important. And some of the more rote hand skills that perhaps For example, like, making many versions of the same asset, building the responsive versions of the same design, scaling your design system, and maybe these things that, that actually took a lot of time from you, but weren't, the biggest bases of your, creative intuition and skill are now going to be, accelerated by AI, and that's terrific. But yes, I think we should be thinking about in school, where do we leverage that? And then honing those skills of taste. I am grateful for my time at Art Center, where I studied industrial design. And when I first joined, they made me go out and buy ellipse guides. I don't know if any of you are familiar with ellipse guides. This was okay, good. We got one person there. That's totally cool that the rest of you are not, because you probably don't need them now. But anyway, you had to buy a binder that was like this thick of these plastic stencils, stencils, sorry. They had a really funky smell. I don't know why, but everybody knew it. This guy knows. But you do this because you had to learn the hand skills of drawing. And there was CAD at the time. We were already utilizing these skills, but we were learning how to see. And a part of that is the slow process of making and building. And so I guess I'm, sitting here talking about how important AI is and how great it is, but I do think that to be really great at seeing what's working and what is going to resonate with your users and what is actually going to solve the problem, because that's number one, right? Is are you building something that really solves your user problem? Is really understanding how to understand your users, how to draw from that to identify the problem coherently and generate ideas, and then vet them based on that learning, and then be able to see what actually meets that need is something that we are going to all need. I think the reality is if you view yourself, if you're a designer or if you're an engineer and you think I move pixels or I write code, if you think that's your job, then then AI might be a competitor. But if you view your job as I am a problem solver, I am a builder, your job is good.
I love that framing. If you think about, during your design training, in addition to having Pantone books and these insane stencils, I've kept all mine. By the way, Katie and I worked at competing firms different times. I was at IDEO, she was at Frog, and I was trained as a roboticist, but worked with a lot of crazy cool product designers. But when I think about that process of living among the tools, of kind of a culture of low inhibitions, of experimentation and prototyping, you learn a lot of context for what do users not say they want, but what are they doing, and what, if upon delivering it, will be the thing that they wanted all along, right? And there's many examples, I think, in product design where that context and holding that context. I think about Stripe Press, and one of the reasons why I'm so inspired by it, I was telling Katie, I recently got the Charlie Munger book that they redid 3 years ago, I can't remember when you did it. But this sense of past, present, future, the sense of what users aren't saying they want, but probably want, that to me feels like the essence of what designers need to continue to become. And I'm curious, when you think about some of the experiences you had, whether it was Art Center or Frog or Airbnb, Lyft, how do you teach some of these things or even learn them? I mean, beauty, craft, living among the tools, sort of just even sense of taste. So how do you advise the young folks that are kind of coming at you and they're like, hey, I want to be like you, I want to know the good thing versus the bad. How do I get better on that front?
Taste, I think, is one of the more difficult things to teach, I think. In fact, when hiring and you look at somebody's portfolio and you see the examples of their work, and it's like, okay, cool, they know the tools and they know how to understand their users and build that towards finding the right problem, or finding the right solution to a problem. But then you kind of look at it and you're like, but this doesn't feel like they've hit the nail on the head. This doesn't feel like they have been able to reach a level of excellence or beauty in their work. That is a moment of caution, because can we bring this person onto the team and teach them that? Maybe, certainly I think we can all hone it. I don't want anybody to give up. But I also think that like it should be something that we think about looking for as a skill that an individual has. But how do you hone or to further develop your sense of taste? I think a big part of it is about observation and paying attention. And so, you can see, who's been successful, or you can see what's been talked about as work that exhibits a great quality and taste, and kind of just do a teardown in your of that for yourself. What did they do well? Is there a strong sense of balance, that like hierarchy is well utilized? They're really thoughtful about context. And as you think about the various components of this work, what stands out to you, and how does it feel? How does it sound? And these are the things that you can start to see that like each of those details are chosen. I think that's the big thing, right? Is like we shouldn't take any of these decisions that you or the people around you are making in building something.
No random acts of design. No random acts of design.
No, yeah, it just like happens. I mean, hopefully I'm not insulting anybody in the room, but I'm just like looking at these chairs, like I bet I see that they made some like effort to give your back some support there, and they got a handle on top. Like that must be easier for people to move it around, and they might even stack. Like there were some things that the people that made that intentionally decided. I see that they didn't intentionally decide to make it beautiful. And I think that there is, you have a choice. There's always a choice, and sometimes it's harder to get to, something that is going to both be, powerful, useful and well-crafted and beautiful. But what is it worth doing if it isn't actually a little bit challenging? I think that is the part that we need to push for.
I want to unpack the beauty point. This notion that beauty is more than subjective. In fact, there's some interesting examples of this. I love your Pete Mondrian example. There's actually another Pete Mondrian one that goes even further back, I think, than the one I've heard you talk about. But people like beautiful things for rational reasons. Clearly, this can be learned. If it can be learned, then a generative AI tool can actually help you with this regard. Do you think that this is part of what's coming for us? It doesn't feel like it's quite there yet today, but like, what are your thoughts on sort of how does beauty, AI, design, like how do those things fit together?
Absolutely. I do think AI is going to help more folks create things that are good, and that look right and feel right and work well. And we've already talked about a number of the ways that like it'll help accelerate that. And so in some ways, it's kind of like raising the floor on overall product quality that we see. It's democratizing it, which is really, really exciting. But I do think, as you said, that there is an aspect to beauty that is not subjective. It's not just in the eye of the beholder, it is objective. So for example, and there's a great book on this called Beauty by Stefan Sagmeister and Jessica Walsh, and they talk about globally, blue is known as the most beautiful color, and that the circle is known as the most beautiful shape. And now obviously this can be, different, each individual, et cetera, but like there is like some sameness there, or like, beautiful faces tend to be more symmetrical, right? So there are these aspects, and AI in some ways is a mirror versus a muse, right? It can like see what is like we as people that have created things over time have said are beautiful, and it can draw on that and it can repeat that. It can take that pattern and take it forward. But what is very interesting, and again, what makes me so excited about the human aligned with AI and what we can do there is this sense of taste and the emotional intelligence that we bring, and our want for something that is unique and special. So yesterday on my flight here, I was reading an article from The Atlantic from 1927. I'm not usually reading articles from the 1927, but I chose to at this point. And it was called The Business Case for Beauty. And what this author was speaking about is that, this was during the Roaring 20s, just before the Great Depression, after the Second Industrial Revolution. And the author was talking about how businesses are realizing that beauty is a really important selling point, and that, the focus on utility and mass production got the world into this kind of world of sameness, And people were hungry for something that, you know, brought awe and joy and demonstrated the care that somebody put into the work. And so they were wanting that in their furniture or in their vehicles or in their, you know, in their bathrooms or whatever it might be. It was now beauty becoming a part of what people sought. And I was thinking about how, you know, kind of similar that is to this point with AI. And I do think we're at the earlier stages of it, but AI in some ways is, or not in some ways, it definitely is democratizing design and making it possible for almost anyone to build good things, to build products that have sleek UI or, you know, better images in your marketing, you know, create films where, you know, like DoorDash did this, like, you know, a stadium, but there wasn't a real stadium. It was just AI generated, right? Like you can, you know, create these tools for lower cost at greater speed. And so it lowers that barrier to entry. But what that may also do is that there might be more of the same. And there might be more products that are actually lacking personality. A lot of sleek UI, but that they all follow the same kind of code or same pattern. And so I think what's really interesting, and certainly a place that, you know, the humans' ability to understand their users on an emotional level and know what's right for the vibe, these are things that we will bring to the equation that AI, you know, doesn't do well. And knowing where, you know, maybe an imperfection is better and maybe something that's mismatching is better, or that like handcraft, because people value the things that take time and aren't easy and aren't like everything else. They value the things that elevate the standard. And I think we get to do that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'd love to shift to how folks in design orgs are learning about the tools, how they're getting kind of coming up the curve, how you guys are doing this at Stripe. I mean, 96% of this is happening as self-directed learning. So folks are basically trying this stuff out on their own. The tools are changing literally by the week. And then, you know, of course, social media, AI, Twitter, a bit of peer learning. I'm surprised that that's not higher. There's a lot of AI content out there, but again, that's only whatever, 17, 18%. You mentioned the sort of Go LLM tool that you have. I'm sure there's like brown bag lunches. I know Figma's doing things like that, where folks kind of share kind of what they're playing around with. Lots of experimentation, and so maybe the issue is that the landscape's moving so quickly that there's like, we don't know yet what to actually center around, whether it's cursor, zero, or what. But I'm curious, when I saw this, I was surprised, but how does this fit with what you're experiencing at Stripe, and what might be some of the ways that folks could accelerate their learning, not just on their own?
Yeah. We are doing brown bags. We're doing things like, you know, kind of share outs internally, just to like share what are different people working on, what tools are they using, how are they using it in their process. And then also bringing external speakers to speak about it, either because they're a part of a company that is building these tools or that they're using it in their company in some way. And so we're really interested in that kind of knowledge exchange. And, you know, also if you've got thoughts on it, I'd love to hear from you on it. I think, you know, need to, as a company, make sure that people understand that, like, you know, this is something that could be, you know, that it's encouraged and it's of great value. There was another survey result that I had read where they had similarly interviewed people, but even outside of design, how they were using AI. And they found that at companies, people are nervous about whether or not their company is okay with it. And so they're shying away from it, or they're doing it under the cover of night, which is, you know, in some ways the company's really missing out on, you know, getting more out of their employees because of that. And so I think it's, you know, about finding ways to introduce it with encouragement, but also, you know, guardrails of which that like can help people do it responsibly. But I think the self-directed piece here is just really wild to see that it is not further encouraged. And again, I just go back to that analogy of like the internet, you know, just like replace the word AI with the internet in your mind. And I think you'll realize like how silly it is that we aren't, you know, just putting it a part of our work more so today. I mean, curious, you invest in so many fantastic organizations and you're, kind of like at the cutting edge of what's happening there. Do you see some good practices that, I can take home as to how we could better embrace?
Most of the information is flowing through, Discord channels, Slack channels, Twitter, X, whatever I'm supposed to call it these days. And I think that will probably continue to persist for some time. But I really do love, what I've seen in some of our portfolio companies is just this, demo Friday kind of dynamic around it, which is like, here's something that I built that I could not have built otherwise. And I think this sort of 10x quote that's on the right side of this is just such a great example of it. I mean, my suspicion is over the next 5 years that we will stop calling human resources. I think it will be resources. And we will have human resources, and then we will have non-human resources that are maybe 100, 1,000, or 10,000x in number what we're doing. And so I think we're gonna see a lot of experimentation around this, and I think there's just so much happening that it'll evolve quickly. But I think the information flowing today with sort of almost the sort of traditional, I mean, when you were talking about taste and style, I was thinking the old-fashioned crits were pretty valuable, right? Like that's how you built some taste. Like you had someone that you were sitting around in a relatively small group, and they were telling you, here's what's beautiful, or here's what's perfect about this thing, and here's what doesn't really work. And so I feel like there's still a lot that needs to happen, kind of in the individual sort of sharing out. So that's my suspicion. So it sounds like you guys are doing a lot of that already. I want to actually sort of ask you about what I feel like it's funny. You're 1927. How beauty can be a business or good business as well. I think there's a related question. So when I think about the very first movies, they were really just someone filming a play. It's like, okay, here's the play happening. We're just like, we're just gonna put a camera in front of them. Maybe they don't have to shout quite as loud to have people hear in the back. But then when you developed cinema, like, oh, there's a different medium here. It's like, I have different angles, I am cutting away, I'm doing close-ups, and it's not just filming a play. I feel like we're still in the like filming a play mode of AI. Like, again, it sort of gets to the like, double stars and magic wands and the sort of bolt-on things. And you were saying a moment ago how like, these tools can be a mirror to us. They are a mirror trained on lots of the data that exists out in the wild. What is your hope for some of the things that it will take us to that are not kind of a mirror yet, that are like truly like, we're making movies now. This is really cool, and it's beyond the chat interface. But I'm curious, when you kind of like dream big about where AI and design is taking us, are there sort of flickers of the future that are sort of exciting you?
We're filming the play right now. Because yes, we're using the tools to do what we're already doing. And then the question is like, what aren't we doing that we could be because of these tools? And, I think that it's really interesting. Like there's a company, Jupiter, that can, literally make films completely out of AI that are like live action, or Free Pick, where you can, create your marketing video like from scratch based on, the image generation powers. Like these are absolutely awesome. So now that work is enabled, what is the next thing that we could be thinking about? Well, we haven't thought about it yet, so to come. But I do think that like part of it kind of gets to that what I was talking about earlier about like how dynamic could your kind of products be today. And so like in real time, a product adjusting itself based on users' behavior. That is absolutely an exciting idea where certainly, we're just at the beginning of that. And there's a lot of ways that could be, kind of problematic, right? And you just like, just because the users say that, the button should be bigger doesn't mean it should always, right? But I think the, intelligence that we could bring to our products, our digital products, and even our physical products in more rapid generation and kind of like seeing things that maybe the humans have missed is definitely going to be an exciting part of that. And then the creativity that we can bring to the work in the image generation, for example, I don't even know how to start talking about AR and VR, but like, to develop these, kind of other worlds that we can, kind of live in and engage in. And then lastly, I'll say, like, part of it, what actually we should have done? We should have had a third part of this talk, which is we should have just had an AI assistant talking with us.
Exactly.
I mean, I will admit I had multiple conversations with Grok in preparation for this conversation, and it was fascinating.
So when you come back to this panel next year, there's just going to be 2 GPUs sitting up here, and you guys will get to talk to that. Or maybe one of our Cerebra systems competing with a GPU. Thank you all for coming, and thank you, Katie, for making the trip from Silicon Valley. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.